Alright boys, so I did not forget about you guys on the JP version of the game. We're going to be talking about the JP GSSR today. I wanted to make sure I got this up while there was still a little bit of time left over. Maybe you haven't done your GSSR yet, you've been waiting for the video to come out, or maybe you haven't started playing the JP version of the game yet. Maybe you're just like, man, is it worth getting into right now? Yeah, I think it's absolutely worth getting into right now because the GSSR for JP is absolutely cracked right now. Like, I'm not super impressed with the whole rotating class banner that they have right now. Like, this lineup of characters is a little disappointing for me, but if it was sacrificed because they made this crazy, just like absolutely broken GSSR, I'm all for it. So that's what we're going to be talking about in today's video. If you are a NA player, this is something that you can greatly look forward to in the future. I mean, I know I'm absolutely stoked. I mean, this is going to be what, 2024, 25 for us, so it's going to be quite a ways away, but man, this GSSR looks absolutely nutty. Now, if you have not already, leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel. Those are free ways to show your support for the boy ZTL. You know, we're on that road to 100K, and every bit of support helps. If you want to further show your support for the channel and get a little bit of something back from it, I'm affiliated by all means with LD Emulator and Loot Cakes down in the description down below. And no, if you use an emulator, you will not get your account deleted. Finally, if you want bonus content, I stream every weekday on Twitch. If I don't stream, you can check the Discord. I probably give a reason why. And you can click that join button to become a channel member and get channel member exclusive content. Now, YouTuber shill intro out of the way. The reason this is so broken is look at this. They've broken up the way that they've actually done the different night classes and things as well. They've broken them all up. Look, they've broken it down to being like, do you need an offensive quick NP from a night class servant? Do you need an offensive extra class servant? Do you maybe need a buster cavalry class servant, right? Like, the fact that they like broke it up like this is insanely good, because now it's no longer like, oh man, I might get Arthur or I might get Okita, but I really need Okita because I'm kind of lacking a strong single target quick servant. And so now those are all bunched in there. You can specifically go for something that you need, right? At least, well, here, there's a little bit of discrepancy, right? Where you have like Okita ults over here, the Saber version, and Sei are AoEs, where these are all single target. I think maybe next year they'll probably specify it even more. They'll be like, this is the quick single target gacha. This is the quick AoE gacha, which is probably a bit better than splitting it by class. But the fact that it's gotten down to the point where it's literally like, do you just need like a single target quick saber? Well, we threw them all in here, and even if you don't get them, you still got a single target, or not single target, but AoE quick servant with one of these two. And that's still going to help you out a lot because you're going for these quick servants, right? It's like, you can also summon on some of these gachas if you're like, hey man, I just got Castoria, because if you remember, JP just a few months ago actually got the rerun for Castoria, and it's like, hey, you have these absolutely broken banners to summon on, where pretty much no matter which one of these banners you summon on, you have a very solid chance of getting a strong, I would say, meta servant for each of the different, you know, types, right? Especially like when it comes to arts. It's just like, you need to buff up your art servants. This is insane, especially if you just summon for Koyanskaya and you're like, man, you know who hits different with Koyanskaya? Someone like Jalter or Arjuna Alter, or maybe you just need Koyanskaya herself, who I don't know if it's really a good thing or a bad thing that she has a damaging NP now, because, you know, she's not with the other support type servants. I would make this just even more broken, but, you know, can't harp on it too much. I guess that's where we'll start off with. When it comes to recommendations for what you should be summoning on, if there's not someone that you're specifically going for, as per usual, going for the support gachas is going to be absolutely king. And look at how strong these are. I mean, first and foremost, a lot of people are going to be looking towards the Castoria version because, you know, Castoria is on that, and she's quite literally the best support type servant in the game. Although, might be a little arguable now with the whole Koyanskaya duo because of the stuff you can do with them. But double Castoria, or even Castoria plus Tamamo, is still disgustingly good and still definitely holds up. So I like that it's at least debatable. I think that makes the meta very healthy in the game. But regardless, this is still an extremely powerful gacha to summon on, because here's the thing that I usually tell people when it comes to value, right? You want to look at the amount of servants that are on there, right? So this is a 1 in 5 chance to get Castori, which is good, as opposed to some of these other ones that are a little more chunky. That immediately is like, that's some pretty high value, right? Because you could look at something like this, where a lot of the servants are very, very strong, and it's very good to summon on if you don't have somebody that you specifically want. Like, if you're just like, I want Muramasa, Melusine, or Ryoma, then it's a strong banner to summon on, because, you know, the likelihood of you getting somebody specific is lower because there's more servants, but it's very good if you just need someone in general. But these are they're like the best of both worlds when it comes to quality, because not only is it very low in the amount of servants that are in the pool, as you can see there's only 5 servants, but all of these servants are extremely strong. Like, every servant here is really good. So no matter which one you go for, support 1 or support 2, you're going to be getting a very strong servant for your box. I mean, Reigns is essentially like the more defensive version of Waver, right? She still gives the 50% to one ally, but she gives very, very strong defensive buffs when it comes to the targetable invincibility, the Waver defensive skill just a little bit weaker, and then her NP just negging type disadvantage is all very, very strong, and it comes with like a debuff cleanse. It just makes her a very, very strong support type servant in general. Castoria, I mean, I don't think she really needs any introduction. Miss Crane gets kind of swapped under the rug. That's probably because you kind of need some 5-head to get the strategies up with Miss Crane, but if you're willing to put in a little bit of the work and you want to like use Miss Crane to her absolute like highest capability, she's definitely worth bringing. She's, I don't know, she's kind of like the secondary art support servant. If you guys have kind of noticed, like, not only do we have like Koyenskaya as like the primary buster servant, but then we also get like Himiko, who's like the secondary buster servant. You know, you have Scotty's the primary quick servant, and then you have Van Gogh as kind of like the secondary quick servant. It's almost kind of like Castoria's primary arts, and Miss Crane over here is like secondary, but Miss Crane doesn't give an arts buff, which is why I'm like hesitant to really call her that, but she's still very good regardless. Shi Huang, as I've been saying, is like the best solo servant in the entire game. If you get him, he's just infinitely more useful. And even if you get a dupe, you're at least buffing up that crit damage that he gives on his NP, so that's at least a good thing. It's somewhat of a useful dupe. And then, as I was just saying, Van Gogh is basically like the secondary buffer when it comes to quick. Van Gogh is absolutely disgusting. Even if you don't want to use her as like a quick support type servant, just go look at her NP and the fact that she's giving like a bajillion crit damage to like your foreigners, or even just 100% crit damage just normally. She's absolutely disgusting with what she does. Like, just for her NP alone, she's absolutely phenomenal, but then her skills just make her just an absolutely broken and busted servant. So that's already like a really strong gacha. But if you already have Castoria and you're like, you know what, I don't have Scotty and I want my quick servants to look a little bit better, then you could go for support 2, where you have Super Orion, which this is one of the good things where technically, because he doesn't have a damaging NP, quote unquote, they can throw him in with the other support type servants. So you can either get a support type servant, or you can get probably one of the best face card DPS servants in the game, right? Like, there's really no one that's going to have their face cards looking as strong as Super Orion, because literally it's like you rip 2 NPs and you're ready to go to just obliterate everything in the game. So he's obviously very good if you could scoop him up. Scotty is still the premium quick support type servant. If you want your quick servants to look as good as possible, you want to go ahead and snag yourself a Scotty. Merlin is still very strong, even after the advent of Koyenskaya of Light and Dark and Himiko coming out, and Morgan, if you want to count her as like a buster piece to the meta, because while she's not a tailored buster support, you do find her commonly in buster team comps because she's kind of like that nice little piece that makes things flow a little bit better. Merlin, on the other hand, is still extremely strong. I believe he's actually going to be coming up on a buff. I think Merlin getting a buff in the near future is definitely in the cards. Something I would really like to see him get is just a buff to his first skill, and this is going to sound a little bit broken to some people, but I think just a simple buff like this would really help him out a lot. Just bring up his battery and his charisma to both 30% value, so he buffs the entire party's attack by 30% and their NP by 30%. That kind of puts him more in line with some of the other support type servants, but it doesn't have him encroach on farming territory, and that's kind of why Merlin will always be maybe looked down upon going in the future, is because he's not meant for farming. And while farming is 90% of the game, and that's kind of why it's a big deal, still having a good servant that's very good in boss fights is always going to be very strong, right? Because these boss fights are getting harder and harder. And so having someone like Merlin who really excels and stuff like that is very strong. So I think buffing those values up to 30% helps him be a assistant to boss killing, but it also gives him that 30% value, which is just a bit more notable when it comes to NP values, because then if you're working with a servant that has, you know, their append skill of 20%, you can use that plus their append skill and a 50% battery. Boom, you got them to 100% NP. Having 20% to the entire party is just a little more dated at this point. Giving them 30% I think would really help. And then honestly, just some party-wide crit buff, right? Where it gives the entire party at bare minimum 30% crit damage for 3 turns. But I think if they want him to be really competitive, they give him 50% for 3 turns of the entire party. Still keep the other one, his third skill, the hero creation, to 100% for 1 turn. I think if they do that, they make him really competitive. Again, not really going to be a farming guy, but he'll definitely at that point lock in his place as the main buster guy when it comes to challenge quests. So if you summon on this and you get Merlin, while he's still very good right now, I think he's coming up on a buff to keep him a bit more relevant and kind of help him stay in that place. So you're kind of getting not only a good servant, but definitely an investment as well. Sherlock is a very strong servant just for his NP alone, because his NP literally is just like, we're going to obliterate the enemy party. We're taking down their defense, piercing invincibility, and I'm giving you guys some crit damage. So we're just going to go ham taro on these people. The only issue with him is that, like, you know, his skills really aren't the biggest deal. I mean, I kind of just wish they give him like a bunch of batteries and NP gain just to make sure he can get to his NP as fast as possible. That's the whole reason you're using Sherlock. It's going to be a little disappointing if you pull him, probably, because not a lot of people are a big fan of Sherlock, but he's definitely good if you do pull him. Try him out if you do have him. He's definitely very fun to use. And then Miko, I mean, as I was saying, she's pretty much like the secondary buster support type servant after Koya and Skya and them, and at least when it comes to crit servants, I mean, she's kind of encroaching on Merlin's territory as far as being like the best buster crit like support type servant. So that's again why I kind of think Merlin needs to get a buff so he doesn't lose his spot. So this is always going to be a very strong gacha to pick. Like either one of these is just very, very strong because all of the servants there are very good. Now, looking at some of the other gachas, the one that really does stick out to me as like the highest value, if you're going for, you know, you just like, man, if I just summon on this gacha and I get like any one of these servants, it's a high value. It's the arts offensive NP ones, right? Specifically this one, followed very closely by this one, right? Like this one and this one are very close. I mean, if I was going to recommend you to summon on one, I would tell you to go for this one because there's less servants in it. But this one's also just, it's just so strong that it's hard for me to not recommend it for people, because you have Muramasa, right, who I've been using since New Year's, and he's just been absolutely just crushing the game. I mean, I bring him to like type neutral, type disadvantage against archers, and this guy just absolutely crushes everything in his way. Like, such a good looping servant, so supremely powerful, not even disappointed in the slightest by this man's performance after waiting for him to come out for like, what, 2-3 years? Granted, mine is at NP2. That's a little caveat. Just need to say that he's at NP2, but he's not grailed or anything, so you can kind of replicate it if you wanted to grail your own. Granted, though, you do miss out on like 1,000 or 2 damage. Like, it's something like that where you miss out on a bit of damage as an NP1 level 100 character as opposed to just a level 90 NP2 character, but still, you could somewhat replicate it. I mean, you could go foe him if you wanted, but regardless, insanely good servant, right? Like, I have nothing but praise for this dude. Nero Bride is insanely good, although the problem is that Nero Bride you kind of use as like a substitute for Castoria, like if you don't have your own Castoria. And if you're summoning on the arts offensive NP, you probably have Castoria, otherwise you'd just be summoning on this one. But I don't know, maybe you're just like, I'll just get Castoria later, which I don't think is smart. If you don't have her, you should definitely summon down here. But if for whatever reason you're just compelled by, I don't know, the Spirit of Delight works, and they tell you to summon on this one, you can at least get her, and she's basically baby Castoria. Benny Enma's a very strong single target art servant. Shiki's a little bit on the weaker side, but she's still definitely usable in like a niche boss runs and stuff where there's a lot of trash bombs that you can insta-kill. Archer Artoria, still like fine in her ability to loop and everything, but she needs buff, so she's actually doing more. Because literally all she's doing right now is looping her NP continually, which is great, that's cool, but people get really caught up on that and they kind of fail to realize that all of the art servants do that nowadays. The reason it was a big deal during year 1 is because it was kind of unheard of when there was like no other support type servants for like a servant to just be able to kind of loop their NP that easily. Not many servants could do that. But now that niche is kind of gone because everybody can do it. You know, it's literally the Incredibles thing, right? Where like he's like, when everybody loops, no one is special, right? Like it's not special anymore. So I desperately wanted to get some buffs. Like give her crit damage, give her stuff where she can, like, I don't know, maybe she just drops 30 stars on her NP and she can just become an arts crit single target archer. I think that'd be insanely good if they wanted to give that to her. But until they decide to touch the Summer 1 servants, you know, she'll be fine, but she's not the best servant you could get by a mile on this gacha. Jean Archer is pretty good if you need an AoE arts archer for looping, just kind of .jpg standard looping servant. Ryoma you can use to loop, but he's definitely more tailored to boss killing, and he's just really strong when it comes to being an offensive AoE Lancer. And then Melusine, you guys know, I think there's like nothing but praise that I have for Melusine as well. She's just one of the best servants in the game, one of the best servants they put out this year. I mean, they just hit a home run with this servant. They just made her absolutely cracked broken. The reason this gacha competes very hard is because you have Kama Avenger and Space Ishtar and Kiara, right? You have like three of some of like the strongest art servants in the game. Even like Space Ishtar, you guys know, when I did the AoE video, she topped to #1 just because she does it all. She does the damage, she loops very easily, she's just very good. And then even while like Kama Avenger I don't think does as good of a job as Space Ishtar, like it's still good that they're comparable to each other. Like like saying one is better than the other really doesn't matter when they are comparable, right? Like when we can have the discussion, that's very good. When you can be compared to Space Ishtar and even just be in the discussion and stand a chance and have it be debatable, that's absolutely broken. And then Kiara, you guys know my thoughts on Kiara, one of the better boss killing servants in the game, especially when it at higher NP copies. This Kiara, I'm not the highest on. She's definitely good. I'm just not like super sold on her being dummy broken. I like her mechanic. I think it's fun to play as her, and that's kind of the issue with Hokusai as well over here. Like I think these characters are very fun to play with because of their mechanics, but usually when FGO makes a quote-unquote fun mechanic thing, it usually causes the servant's performance to suffer a little bit, because the example I'll usually give is just, if a servant got a straight up 50% Buster Mana Burst for 3 turns, you would use that servant over a servant that's like, for 3 turns, anytime I get hit, I get a 10% Buster buff. And you're like, well, potentially that servant could get up to like a 90% Buster buff, right? If they were just getting slammed by everything, and you're like, that's insanely good. But it's like the likelihood of you getting to that point and being able to pull that off without something going wrong in the fight, because people just, I don't know, they forget that the enemies can also do things for some reason. So it's like the likelihood of you getting there, not very likely. So you're just going to go with the 50% consistently better Buster Mana Burst, right? And so that's why these servants that are very fun to use but more gimmicky tend to suffer a little bit. But I think even if you get them when you go for this gacha, like any of these 3, you're definitely solid. And then Yang is just, I mean, she just obliterates bosses. Like as long as you can slap a burn on them, right, and you can reduce their defense, and then you can pair her with Castoria or Tamamo just to give her extra damage, you're pretty much just obliterating whoever you're fighting. And then, I mean, this is not a bad one for arts, right? I just don't see it really necessary to summon on this one, because you could get Berserker Musashi, or you could have a better chance just getting Kama Avenger or Space Ishtar, right? Who kind of just do the job better. I'm not going to lie, having the 50% battery is just infinitely more versatile than just having raw NP gain. Because it means, hey man, you don't got to use or rely on like, you know, a scope or anything. Although Musashi, depending on the nodes, is fine to just like start off with like a decent CE and then just be brought to 100% with Castoria. Not really trying to get into that debate right now, but just generally, instead of just trying to get for Berserker Musashi, if you need a looper, you're better off summoning for here where you have 2 options for it. So there is that. Da Vinci Lolly, very, very strong. Like one of the best looping servants in the game. But again, I mean, if you need looping servants, these 2 are just generally going to be applicable in any situation because of their Avenger status, whereas, you know, Da Vinci's a writer. And then, like, these other ones, they're not bad. Like, Murasaki's good. Da Vinci, I'm not the highest on. And then Shuten, I think, is good for boss fights, but is really held back by the fact that she only has 1 hit on her NP, so I just don't see this one as, like, the highest value. You could still summon for it if you really like Berserker Musashi, because, again, like, Her, Da Vinci, and Murasaki, I think, are all fine. Shuten's a decent consolation prize. You can get some use out of her. And then Da Vinci's 50-50 as to whether or not you're really going to be using her all that much. So definitely if you're going for arts, I would either hit this one or this one, just kind of depending on your account's needs. It just kind of depends. Like, this is better if you just don't mind what you get, because generally if you get something here, they're pretty much all going to be usable, right? Like, the only servant that's going to have, like, real niche use here is Shiki, right? Everybody else, like, as much as I was harping on, you know, Archer Artoria over here, she's still just generally useful, right? Like, the fact that she's, like, a year one very simple servant does at least mean you can just bring her to whatever, right? She's not really relying on any niches. And then if you want more either farming or boss killing with, like, these three right here, Hokusai is kind of just whatever you want to use her for, but you want looping or boss killing, that's kind of your way to go. So that's kind of what I think about the arts ones. The quick one, I mean, it's a little bit more of the same, although I think this is probably the one that everybody's going to be going for, because, I mean, like, let's just be honest. You have Dante's on here, who's, like, the best quick looping servant in the game. You have Kagekiyo, who is, like, better Jalter, but quick, which hurts me to say, because you guys know I'm a Jalter sim. But, you know, she's absolutely insane. Literally just quick Jalter, but better. Doman is absolutely insane. Even, like, you guys know I harp on the alter ego class, but even this man being an alter ego, I think is just absolutely insane. He kind of just breaks through that mold. Meltalilith, same thing, as like a single target instead of being an AoE. Jacques over here, I'm not the highest on, but I do think she is quite good. She's like a decent, like, if like, what I'm trying to say is, like, if she's the worst servant here, it's not all that bad. Voyager's kind of like Dante's, doesn't hit as hard, but has a 50% battery. That's kind of how that balances out. Karen is obviously a very, very solid servant. So, like, I just think this is going to be the one that a lot of people are going to be hitting because it's just absolutely insane. This one, I could also see an argument for telling people to summon on, because it's just Dante's and, like, Kagekiyo and then, like, Doman. Like, this, like, core 5 right here is just super valuable, with these two being the consolation prizes, that it's hard for me to recommend people to summon on, like, the other two. But again, this is crazy, because keep in mind, if you're summoning on this, you probably already have Scotty, right? And so normally my critique of, like, Maid Alter or Skahawk over here is that it's like, without somebody like Scotty, they definitely struggle to get their NP back, and they definitely fail to be very consistent. But with Scotty, none of those problems exist. Like, Scotty completely takes those issues and flushes them down the toilet. And so then she just becomes like a free big damage beat stick, right? Who's like really only negative is that she doesn't have the best survivability, I guess. I mean, Izumo's absolutely crazy. I mean, I just did a video on her like a couple months ago when she came out. She's nuts. Kama, I don't think I really need to talk too much about how insane she is. I mean, the 50% battery, the good survivability, the ability to, like, charm lock people with her NP, and the fact that she has an alter ego niche, which is absolutely insane. That makes her crazy. MHX people sleep on, because, you know, they think about her in year one and they're like, oh, she wasn't very good, but after all of her buffs, she's absolutely dummy insane. She is, like, such a good offensive single target quick servant. If you want to look at her as the consolation prize, she's a very strong consolation prize similar to this one. And then MHX Alter is just the best, like, single target quick servant you have in the game. Like, if you want somebody to obliterate a boss in a quick manner, you bring MHX Alter. You've got 3 very strong turns you can do with her. And then the fact that, you know, you may say that, like, she doesn't have any survivability or anything is pretty much just fixed by the fact that she kills everything in 3 turns with double Scotty. So, and again, I'm assuming you have Scotty if you're summoning on this banner. So literally, it's just like, do you need to, like, obliterate somebody with single target? Because if you need that, I definitely would go with this. But if you need more, like, maybe farming help, because you can use Dante's, Voyager, or Doman over here for farming with the, like, the added prize of potentially getting Kagekiyo or Melt for single target, that might be good. But if you're going for single target, instead of just trying to get Kagekiyo, who's like the main one you would want from here, this one you're just getting a good option no matter what you get. Like, all of them are going to be very good. They're all just going to be very strong. And then this, I'm not gonna lie, just seems like the weakest of the 3 quick banners. Like, I just don't really see a reason to summon on this. As good as Okita is, as good as Okita Alter is, they just don't really compete with the quality you get for these banners. They just really don't hit the same levels of, you know, power that you can get from these. So I would avoid this one if at all possible. I think these ones are definitely just a bit stronger when it comes to the quality. And then we finally have the Buster Servants, which, because there are so many flippin' Buster Servants in the game, they had to split a lot of these into like 300 million banners. Like, look at them, they all have 2 banners. But I mean, really, when it comes to Buster, like, this is just the best one to go for. I'm just not gonna hold you guys. Like, not only do you have Koyanskaya, who is a good Buster DPS servant, but is actually like the premium Buster support type servant, you also have Arjuna Alter on here, right? And then don't be deceived. You see Ilya and you're just like, oh man, I don't like Ilya, but they gave her a 50% battery. People forget about that. They gave her a 50% battery. So now she's insanely viable. Raiko is still very decent. She's not the craziest servant in the world. She probably needs like a 30% battery or something to maybe help out her consistency a little bit, or buff up like her mana burst or something. Because I think I recall. Actually, let me look this up before I sound like a dummy. But if I recall, isn't her mana burst like 30%? Yeah, it's 30% for one turn. It's so weird. Like, this doesn't make any sense when mana burst is supposed to be 50%. But yeah, like, she has a little bit of oddities to her, but she's still very usable. Hijikata, aside from the memes, actually, you can get some mileage out of him. You can use him as, like, a big beat stick, right? Like, he's got the guts and everything. He's very usable. And then Iskandar, I mean, as much as I meme on him, you know, the fact that it's like, he's kind of getting left behind because he doesn't have a battery, he still does absolute big chungus damage and drops like 50 million stars for everybody to play around with. So if you're summoning for a Buster banner, you're pretty much just summoning on this one. Like, there's no reason to summon on the other ones. Like, this one is fine. You can get like Ishtar, Ibuki, Romulus, or what's his name, Moriarty over here, and those are all really strong options. But it's like, they ain't Arjuna Alter, bro. They ain't Koyanskaya. Like, they're just not holding a candle, right? Like, this one is fine because you have Musashi, Gilgamesh, Ereshkigal. Like, that's a good core to have. You know, it's 3 of 5. They're pretty decent, but they ain't Arjuna Alter or Koyanskaya, though. Like, you're just going to be summoning on this one if you're a Buster, dude. Like, you're just not going for any of the other ones. Unless you're like me, maybe you're a Morgan simp. But even then, I would tell you, go for the Koyanskaya or Arjuna Alter, because even if you don't get Koyanskaya, right, you could still get Arjuna Alter, right, who's still like the best AoE Buster servant in the game. And then even if you don't get him, you could potentially get Ilya, who is like absolutely crazy because she does so much damage. And then they also gave her a 50% battery, which made her like infinitely more consistent. And then even if you don't get her, you could still get servants like Cleopatra, Iskandar, or Raiko, who are very solid right now. And with just like one little skill buff or something, they could become absolutely insane. So it's like, at the very least, you either get like one of these stronger Buster servants in their categories, like when it comes to single target AoE and then like AoE slash support, you get that, or you get a very strong investment with them, right? As opposed to like fishing in here for Morgan, fishing in here for Ferryman. You know, I just don't see it as like, it's just not a good idea to not go for this banner. Like, I just think that's very obvious, and I feel like I'm over explaining it, but I feel like that is the guide for the JP GSSR. I didn't want to be too late on it. By the way, I have seen this like new art. It is absolutely adorable. I love it. But yeah, I think with all that being said, I've made my point effectively. I hope this was very helpful for you guys. If you're an NA person like me, you should be getting extremely gassed up about this. I remember waking up New Year's and just being like, bro, what are these banners? What's going on right now? Because like the wiki hadn't updated and we were looking through and I was like, bro, did they separate them by single target and their typing? And, you know, lo and behold, they didn't separate them by targeting, but they did separate them by class and card type, which I think is really sick. So hopefully, fingers crossed, maybe for the anniversary or next New Year's, they separate them by target ability and their card type, because I think that would just be absolutely stupid, broken, insane. But we'll see what they do in the future. Leave your thoughts in the comments down below, guys. And with all that being said, I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. You guys have yourselves a nice day. Peace. Late, guys.